Hello, and welcome to my remake of my read-aloud of Captain Underpants and the Preposterous Plight of the Purple Potty People. Now, if you're wondering why I'm remaking this, then I have no good explanation other than pure boredom. I guess I just wanted to do this, and I had random motivation to make this video, so yeah. And it doesn't help matters that at the time of recording this, it was snowing in my area, so that didn't give me a lot of options to go outside, because I've already posted a lot of snow videos before, so let's just begin with the read aloud. Also, spoiler warning, blah 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 blah, even though this book came over like 10 years ago, blah blah blah, I get the idea. Anyways, let's begin. Captain Underpants and the Preposterous Plight of the Purple Potty People, the 8th epic novel by Dav Pilkey with color by Jose Garibaldi and Corey Barba. Hi everybody, as you can see, we've been experiencing some technical difficulties. This comic book should get you up to date on our stories so far. The often told, untold story of Captain Underpants by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Once upon a time, there was two cool kids named George and Harold. We're hep to the jive. Me too. But they had a mean old principal named Mr. Krupp, who was mean. Redundancy much? I'm all mad and stuff. So George and Harold hypnotized him with a 3D hypno ring. You will obey our every command. Okay. Then they accidentally made him think he was a superhero. You are now Captain Underpants. Okay. Look at me. I'm Captain Underpants. But he escaped and ran off to fight crime. Tra-la-la! Rats. George and Harold ran after him. Hey, come back here. No way. Then one day he drank some Mountain Dew. Superpower juice. Glug, glug, glug. Now he has superpowers and stuff. Look at me. I got superpowers and stuff. Aw, man. But if you think that's bad, it gets worse. Pay attention because this next part is important. The worst part is that whenever Mr. Krupp hears somebody snap their fingers, he turns into Captain Underpants. Tra-la-la! And whenever somebody splashes water on Captain Underpants' face, he turns back into mean old Krupp. Blah, blah, blah. In their last adventure, George and Harold got two new pets. A bionic hamster named Sulu, cool, and a pterodactyl named Crackers. Awesome! Everything was cool, until this brainiac named Melvin showed up. I'm telling! Melvin made a time machine out of a purple potty. It looks like this. Anyways, George and Harold wanted to use the time machine, but Melvin had one rule. Don't use the time machine 2 days in a row! Okay, if you use it 2 days in a row, something very bad will happen. Okay! I mean it! Don't use it 2 days in a row! Okay! Seriously, don't use it 2 days in a row! Okay! Melvin, we get the idea. Then, hey, let's completely disregard what Melvin said to us and use this thing 2 days in a row. Okay. And so, George, Harold, Crackers, and Sulu used the time machine 2 days in a row, and something very bad happened. And this picture goes on forever. What will happen next? Treehouse Comics Inc. Chapter 1, George and Harold. This is George Beard and Harold Hutchins. George is a skeleton on the right with the tie and the flat top. Harold is the one on the left with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now. Apparently, Harold's hair is skeletal. George's too, apparently. As you might remember from our last adventure, George and Harold had recently made the horrifying mistake of trying to pass through a synthetic time warp without letting the C26906 Super Bim Fliminatrix drive of their Beebleflux Capacitating Zossifier cooldown, thus creating a sub-paradoxical dimensionalistic alternicon shift, which opened up a hyper-googliphonic screen door into a sub-omnivating ultrazenticular bio-nanozonaflanamarzipan. To put it in scientific terms, they screwed up. But don't get all freaked out because everybody looks like a skeleton. X-ray beams are a normal byproduct of interdimensional reality shifting. Don't worry, it'll probably clear up by the time you turn the page. See? What did I tell you? George, Harold, and their loyal pets suddenly found themselves wishing that they had never set foot inside the petrifying purple potty that was about to send them all on a journey into the horrifying abyss of the unknown. A journey that would probably spell impending doom for themselves and would most likely bring about the end of our civilization as we know it. But before I can tell you that story, I have to tell you this story. Chapter 2, Those Wacky Grown-Ups. It's been said that adults spend the first 2 years of their children's lives trying to make them walk and talk, say dada, and the next 16 years trying to get them to sit down and shut up. It's the same way with potty training. Most adults spend the first few years of a child's life cheerfully discussing pee and poopies and how important it is to learn to put your pee-pee and poo-poo in the potty like big people do. But once children have mastered the art of toilet training, they are immediately forbidden to ever talk about poop, pee, toilets, and other bathroom-related subjects again. Such things are suddenly considered rude and vulgar and are no longer rewarded with praise and cookies and juice boxes. The signs these people are holding up say pro-pee, hooray for poop, and make poo not war. The signs that the opposing team are holding read down with poop, no diarrhea in our school, pee stinks, and ban poo. One day you're a superstar because you pooped in the toilet like a big boy, and the next day you're sitting in the principal's office because you said the word poopy in American history class, which, if you ask me, is a perfect place to say that word. You're probably wondering, why would adults do that? Why would they encourage something one day and discourage it the next? The only answer I can think of is that adults are totally bonkers and should probably be avoided at all times. Perhaps you'll be lucky and find a small handful of grown-ups whom you can trust, but I'm sure we can all agree that you really have to keep an eye on most adults, most of the time. Adults are nuts. Grown-ups are screwballs. Which is just what George and Harold did. Chapter 3, The School of Hard Knocks. Unfortunately, the adults at George and Harold's school were anything but trustworthy. Take their principal, Mr. Krupp, for example. Mr. Krupp's wicked heart thrived on the teardrops of children. His very soul danced at the thought of crushing a child's spirit and dashing his or her hopes and dreams against the jagged rocks of never-ending despair. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Life is hard. Get used to it. Each day, Mr. Krupp would stand at the doorway to his office, gleefully handing out detention slips to any child who was unfortunate enough to cross his putrid path, and for very minor infractions too, such as smiling, breathing without permission, or smelling funny. As bad as Mr. Krupp was, most of the teachers in George's and Harold's school were even worse. These teachers are sadists. Why haven't they been put in prison yet? Fortunately for George and Harold, their evil educators were not very intelligent. They could be outsmarted easily, and they often were. The sign says, push button to open door. And then they're rearranging the letters. Now, you might think that wasn't very sporting of George and Harold to try and outsmart dumb people, and perhaps you'd be right. But George and Harold were just trying to make the best of a bad situation. The sign now reads, push on butt to open door. But unfortunately for George and Harold, their bad situation was about to get much, much worse. Chapter 4, Purple Pottyville. After several intense minutes of orange flashing lights, x-ray beams, and lightning-infused electric whirlwinds, the purple potty finally stopped shaking and sputtering and came to a sudden halt. Thick yellow smoke poured from its glowing hot tailpipes as the grinding gears and coughing motor shifted into power-down mode. George and Harold had no idea what to expect. They were supposed to be perched high up in a prehistoric tree 65 million years ago in the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic era, but as they stepped out of the plastic door of the purple potty, the boys were disheartened to find themselves in the middle of the school library, right where they had started. "What are we doing here?" asked Harold. "I don't know," said George. "Something must have gone wrong." Harold carefully tucked crackers back into his book bag, and the two boys looked around the brightly lit library. "Well, hello, boys," said the school librarian. "This is Banned Books Week. Would you like to expand your minds today?" No thanks," said George. "Hey," said Harold, "didn't you get fired in our last book?" "I don't think so," said the librarian. Said George. "I'm not feeling very good about this." "Duh, not feeling good?" asked Melvin Sneedley, who had been struggling to comprehend the easy-to-read children's bestseller, Frankenfart versus the Bionic Barf Bunnies from Diarrhea Land. "Maybe you should go see the school nurse." "We have a school nurse?" asked George. "I thought we just had a box of Band-Aids and a rusty saw," said Harold. "Duh, of course we have a school nurse," said Melvin. "His office is right next to our 5-star gourmet cafeteria." George and Harold looked confused. Thanks," said George, "but we'll be okay." Chapter 5, Strangers in Paradise Lost. As George and Harold walked down the hallway of their school, they noticed that something seemed wrong. Very wrong, but they couldn't figure out what it was. "Imagination is more important than knowledge," said by Albert Einstein. Miss Anthrop, the unbelievably crabby school secretary, passed by the boys and smiled kindly. "Why, hello, George and Harold," she said. "It's so good to see you two. Have a wonderful day." George and Harold looked at her suspiciously. What just happened?" asked Harold. "I don't know," said George, "but something strange sure is going on." George and Harold opened their locker and carefully put Crackers and Sulu inside. Shh, they're asleep, said George. Good, said Harold. They can take a nap while we get to class. On the way to their homeroom, George and Harold stopped to switch the letters around on the lunch menu sign. It originally says today's menu, soy burgers, hot lime pie, and apple juice. But just as they were finishing, their principal, Mr. Krupp, caught them red-handed. Hey, Bubs, he said, what are you kids doing out here? Please eat my plump, juicy boogers. George stammered. You see, we were, please eat my plump, juicy boogers, said Mr. Krupp, giggling with glee. That's gotta be the funniest thing I've seen all day. You boys really crack me up. You're hilarious. Then, with a spring and a step, Mr. Krupp pranced away, whistling a merry tune. What just happened? Asked Harold. Shh, whispered George. Look! George pointed at two kids who were coming toward them, reading a homemade comic book. The kid on the left had a t-shirt and a flat top. The one on the right had a tie and a bad haircut. Please feel free to remember that now, if you wish. It's us, whispered George. How can they be us, whispered Harold. I thought we were us. And the sign underwent further mutation, and it now reads Anarchy Rules. George and Harold hid behind a trash can as their two lookalikes walked toward them. They stopped in front of the lunch menu sign and frowned. Then a devilish look came over their faces as they quickly began rearranging the letters. The strange boy snickered wickedly. That's kind of hard to say, as they sneaked away from their prank. What just happened? Asked Harold. I think I figured it out, said George. Chapter 6. The World According to George. I think the purple potty brought us to some kind of strange backwards universe, said George. No way, said Harold. That kind of thing only happens in poorly written children's stories whose authors have clearly begun running out of ideas. Self-burn. Here, I'll prove it, said George. The two friends walked to the cafeteria and took a whiff. That's weird, said Harold. It doesn't smell like dirty diapers, greasy dishwater, and moldy tennis shoes in here anymore. It smells like food. Yep, said George. Next, the boys went to the gymnasium. That's weird, said Harold. Our gym teacher isn't fat anymore, and he's not being incredibly cruel to the non-athletic kids like he usually is. Yep, said George. Finally, George and Harold stepped outside. That's weird, said Harold. All of our evilest and most terrifying enemies from the past have been miraculously transformed into good guys. Yep, said George. Including the Turbo Toilet 2000, Zorks, Clax, and Jennifer from Book 3, Professor Poopypants or Tippy Tinkle Trousers from Book 4, and Carl, Trixie, and Frankenbooger. And there's also Dr. Diaper, too. Chapter 7. Getting Out of Town. George and Harold ran back to their locker. Let's grab Crackers and Sulu and get out of this crazy place, said George. Good idea, said Harold. But when they opened the locker door, their two friends were missing. Where the heck are Crackers and Sulu? Cried George. I don't know, said Harold. Nobody else has a combination to our locker. Nobody else except... Our twins! Gasped George. Harold tried to shut their locker, but the door jammed on something. What's that? Asked George. Looks like a comic book, said Harold. He held it up and read the front cover out loud. At that moment, George and Harold began to get a dreadful sense of the horror they were up against. Chapter 8. The Preposterous Blight of Captain Blunderpants. With no author credits on the cover for some reason. The Preposterous Plight of Captain Blunderpants by Harold Hutchins and George Beard. Once upon a time, there lived two evil children named George and Harold. I'm bad. I am bad as well. They had a very nice principal who went by the name of Mr. Krupp. Hello, boys. Have a pleasant day. Whatever. One day, George and Harold hypnotized Mr. Krupp. You will obey us. Yes, master. They made him think he was an evil villain. You are now Captain Blunderpants. All right. George and Harold made Captain Blunderpants do all sorts of evil things. Steal us a video game system. Okay. And Captain Blunderpants obeyed. Crash. This is the Game Station 2000. Steal us a big screen television. Okay. Crash. I'm so happy I could cry. Me too. Uh-oh. Crash. Soon, George and Harold had the world's coolest and probably most expensive treehouse. Do you boys need anything else? Yeah, how about a pizza? Sure thing, masters. And so, crash! Hold it right there, Captain Blunderpants. You've stolen TVs, jacuzzis, pop machines, massage chairs, and disco balls, but this time you've gone too far. You're under arrest for grand theft pizza. You've gotta catch me first. Zip! And the chase was on. Soon Captain B was chased onto the freeway. When suddenly, oh no! Hey! Look out! Scream! Yeah! Crash! The strange mixture of chocolate, peanut butter, and extra cheese combined to create a super powerful chemical reaction, sizzle sizzle, which gave Captain Blunderpants amazing superpowers. I feel super! Sizzle. And of course, Captain Blunderpants' catchphrase is the opposite of Captain Underpants' catchphrase, tra-la-la. Captain Blunderpants' catchphrase is la-la-tra. Then, here's your pizza, boys. Hey, where's the pineapple? Crash. Wow, just think of all the evil things we could do now. Pineapple on pizza is the most evil food combination. With Captain Blunderpants as our evil, superpowered slave, we'll be able to get away with anything. Soon the entire world will be ours. Epilogue. Oh, by the way, whenever Captain Blunderpants hears someone snap his fingers, snap, he turns back into Mr. Krupp. Have a swell day. And whenever Mr. Krupp gets water on his head, he turns back into Captain Blunderpants. Grrr! Remember that now. Evil Treehouse Comics, LLC. Disclaimer, the Eigenground Monitor channel does not endorse turning nice teachers into evil villains who will steal stuff for you. Eigenground Monitor would never endorse that stuff. Chapter 9, Not Without My Hamster and My Pterodactyl. I think our evil twins made this comic book, said Harold. They must have, said George. The artwork is really bad, and I'm pretty sure they misspelled some words. Let's get out of here, said Harold. Not without crackers and Sulu, said George. George and Harold ran to a window and looked out. There they saw their two evil twins sneaking home, carrying their beloved pets with them. Sulu and Crackers have no idea what's going on, said George. They think those two guys are us. How in the world are we going to stop us, asked Harold. Chapter 10, Hypno Horror. George and Harold knew exactly where those evil twins had taken Crackers and Sulu, to the same place they would have taken them, their treehouse. So our two heroes dashed home as fast as they could. Then they climbed up the treehouse ladder as quietly as they could. And just like the comic book that they made, Evil George and Evil Harold have an ice cold soda machine, a disco ball, and probably some other stuff that's not shown here. But when they peeked inside, they saw something that was 389 times worse than they ever could have imagined. Their evil twins were hypnotizing their beloved pets with a 3D hypno ring. You will obey our every command, said Evil Harold. Yeah, said Evil George, and you'll be really wicked from now on, too. George and Harold gasped, which is actually not a very smart thing to do if you're trying to go unnoticed. Hey, look, shouted Evil Harold. Gaspers! Get 'em! Shouted Evil George to their newly hypnotized pets. Crackers didn't move. The dazed pterodactyl shook his head and looked a little confused. But Sulu immediately sprung into action. He lunged at George and Harold, grabbed them by their shirts, and yanked them to the ground. Hey, said Evil George, those kids look just like us. What should we do with them? We can't take any chances, said Evil Harold. Then he called to Sulu in a loud and commanding voice, Oh, destroy them, oh wicked hamster! Chapter 11, Crackers to the Rescue. Crackers did not understand what was going on, but the plucky pterodactyl knew that something needed to be done, and quickly. So with a sudden whoosh of flapping wings, Crackers swooped in and grabbed George and Harold from the relentless little paws of their raging robotic rodent rival, which is totally easy to say 10 times fast with a mouthful of crackers. Crackers as in the food, not the pterodactyl. Oh no! Screamed Harold. Crackers is going to fly us high into the air and drop us! We're doomed! Actually, I think he's trying to rescue us, said George. But he got hypnotized just like Sulu, said Harold. Why on earth would he do the opposite of what he was ordered to do? And how come all of our pronouns are getting italicized? Asked George. Let's not worry about that now, said Harold. We've got to get out of here! But we can't leave Sulu behind, cried George. Don't worry, said Harold. We'll come back for Sulu. So the three friends flew to the school and headed upstairs to the library. Hey, that looks like a pterodactyl, said Mr. Krupp as our heroes pushed past him. Let me pet him! Let me pet him! Mr. Krupp cried, chasing after them. George, Harold, and Crackers finally reached the library just in time to see Sulu and their evil twins smash through the ceiling with a terrible crash. Crash! You losers won't get away from us this time, said Evil Harold. Desperately, George, Harold, and Crackers tumbled into the purple potty, slammed the door shut, and quickly reset the controls. Mr. Krupp and Sulu pounded on the door of the purple potty, while George and Harold's evil twins shook the malfunctioning time machine from side to side. All at once, an orange light started flashing wildly. The purple potty began to shake and wobble violently, and then the entire room lit up with an explosive burst of lightning as the purple potty, and everyone around it, disappeared into a whirlwind of electric air. Chapter 12. Kablamski! Suddenly, there was another blinding flash of light. Everyone around the purple potty flew off in different directions. Then the purple potty stopped shaking and wobbling and switched into shut-down mode. Reading might offend you. Why take a chance? George, Harold, and Crackers peeked out. Look, said Harold, there aren't any books in this library. One must be back in our own reality. But we've got to be sure, said George. The two boys tucked Crackers into Harold's book bag and crept out into the hallway. As they peered into the windows of nearby classrooms, they saw room after room of heartbroken and despondent-looking children. Some were standing in corners weeping. Others were sitting on dunce stools wearing humiliating hats, while still others were writing unbelievably degrading sentences over and over on the chalkboard as their teachers rifled through their lunchboxes, stealing all the best desserts. Yep, sighed George. We're back in our own reality. I never thought I'd say this, said Harold, but it's good to be home. To the treehouse, cried George. My parents only pretend to love me. I apologize for being born. I'm so ugly when I was born the doctor slapped my mom. And the hats on these students say, dunce, loser, I'm a stupid, duh, Mr. Lice Guy, dummy, and this will go on my permanent record. Chapter 13. Purple Potty People Unite! Seconds after George, Harold, and Crackers left the library, four confused beings from an alternate dimension began a stir. Evil George, Evil Harold, Evil Sulu, and Nice Mr. Krupp stumbled to the center of the strange, empty library, rubbing their heads and looking around curiously. Look, said Evil George, this library has no books on the shelves. Said Evil Harold. It looks like we've entered some kind of alternate universe, an illogical reality where everything is backwards. Backwards, eh? Said Evil George. We could do quite well in a place like this. He walked over to the drinking fountain and splashed some water on Nice Mr. Krupp's face. Suddenly, Nice Mr. Krupp's confused smile turned into an evil frown. He ripped off his clothes and tied a curtain from a nearby window around his neck. Then Evil George handed him a bad toupee, and the pernicious principal stood before them, snarling angrily through his flared nostrils. I am Captain Blunderpants! He shouted in a thunderous voice. Chapter 14, the chapter where some stuff happens. Couldn't have told ya. Meanwhile, back at their treehouse, George and Harold grabbed some supplies before heading off to save Sulu. We'll need our 3D hypno ring, said George, to change Sulu back to his old self again. Cool, said Harold, and we better take the rest of this extra strength super power juice just in case. Good idea, said George. The two friends stuffed their supplies and their pet pterodactyl into their book bags and headed down the treehouse ladder. Just where the heck do you two think you're going? Asked a commanding voice at the bottom of the ladder. It was George's dad, and he didn't seem very happy. Said George, we need to go back to school for something. Yeah, said Harold, we forgot something. Well, it'll have to wait until tomorrow, said George's dad. We're having dinner with the Hutchinses tonight, remember? Oh yeah, said George, it's Grandparents' Day. We almost forgot. Well, you're just in time for dinner, said George's dad. Go inside and wash up. But the fate of the entire world is in our hands, cried Harold. The fate of the entire world can wait until tomorrow, said George's dad. Chapter 15, Super Supper. After they washed their hands, the two boys went to the dining room. George's parents had prepared a big meal, and everybody waited patiently for George and Harold to join them. Harold's mom, sister, and grandpa were there, along with George's mom, dad, and his great-grandma. Hello, babies, said George's great-grandma. What have you boys been up to today? Nothing, said George as he hugged his great-grandma. We made you and Grandma a comic book yesterday, said Harold. You did, said Harold's grandpa. Well, let's have a look. George shuffled through his book bag, taking things out and laying them on the table. It's here somewhere, he said. Finally, he pulled out 2 copies of their latest comic book, The Adventures of Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle. It's about how you guys turn into superheroes and save the world and stuff, said George. I drew the pictures, said Harold. Well, that's very nice, boys, said George's dad. Now sit down and let's eat. We can't, said George. We've got to go now. It's really important. George's and Harold's grandparents poured themselves a glass of juice and began reading their new comic books while the boys continued arguing with George's dad. Chapter 16, The Adventures of Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle, an epic novella by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. The Adventures of Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle by George Beard and Harold Hutchins. Everybody knows that grandparents are kinda dorky. They tell dumb jokes. Why did the silly Willie throw his clock in the air? He wanted to see time fly. Ha ha. They call you embarrassing nicknames in public. Hello, babies. Ha ha. And they have no sense of what things cost. Here's a nickel. Why don't you buy a video game with it? Thanks, I will. But grandparents are still cool for one reason. We're old, and we don't care what anyone thinks. Out of my way, Buster Brown. Shove. Step aside. You bother me. Whack. Our heroes. And so, everything was cool until one day, when a strange new store opened up downtown called Robo-Geezers, Inc. They were selling robots.
Hey kids, trade in your old worn-out grandparents for the latest in Robo-Geezer technology.
Cool.
They're tons better than regular grandparents. They tell funny jokes.
What's 40 feet long and smells like pee? Line dancers at the old folks' home. Ha ha!
They call you cool nicknames in public.
Hey Thor, yo, what up dog?
And best of all, they have no sense of what things cost.
Here's $10,000 for a candy bar. Soon, every kid in town was trading in their old grandparents. Hey, what's going on? Nothing. Where are you taking us? Nowhere? For brand new Robo-Grannies and Grandpatron 2000s. Wow, cool. I love my new Robo-Geezers. Soon, there was only 2 real grandparents left in town. You wouldn't trade us in, would you? No way. You better not, or you'll get a whooping. Anyway, one day, George and Harold's grandparents went downtown. Something fishy is going on in there. So they snuck inside the building. Shh, keep out. Soon, hey look! Evil stuff. They opened the door and saw a tragic discovery. Hey, all the grandparents in town got totally captured. Oh my. We've got to save those old folks. But how? Beats me. Hey look, a whole box of hard candies. Let's forget those geezers for now and just eat candy. What geezers? Munch, munch. Meanwhile, in the next room...
In a few more days, those old folks will be under our control. Cool. Then I'll give them superpowers. How will you do that? Easy. I've got a whole box of superpowered hard candies in the other room. Old people love hard candies. I know.
Later, those candies were good. I feel so strong. Me too. I feel powerful.
Oh no, those guys ate all my superpowered hard candy. Uh-oh.
George and Harold's grandparents join hands. Geezer powers activate, and they spinned around and around. Soon they were transformed. I'm Boxer Boy. I'm Great Granny Girdle.
I'm out of here. I'm with you.
The bad guys ran upstairs. They got into a UFO on top of their building and took off.
Calling all Robo-Geezers! Attack Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle!
Suddenly, all the Robo-Geezers in town transformed. Click, click, and off they flew. The Robo-Geezers attacked, but Boxer Boy and Great Granny Girdle were faster than a speeding electric scooter, zoom, more powerful than adult diapers, bonk, and able to leap tall buildings without breaking a hip. Whee! But there's too many of them. I have an idea. Let them chase you for a while. So the robots all chased Great Granny Girdle, and Boxer Boy attacked the spaceship. Hey! Pow! Punch! Bam! Bang! Crash! Kicky. Then he got some paint. Hey! Sss, and added the finishing touch. Hey, Robo-Dorks! Look! What? Hey! Yummy! The Robo-Geezers tried to devour the spaceship in a wild feeding frenzy. They ate and ate and ate and ate. Munch, munch, munch. Then one of them bit on the fuel line. And... kaboom! We're free! Hooray for Boxer Boy! And 3 cheers for Great Granny Girdle! The end. Treehouse Comics, Inc. Chapter 17. Meanwhile, back at the treehouse, while George and Harold pleaded with George's dad to be excused from dinner, a pack of evil thugs was just outside their window, sneaking up into their treehouse. We've got to create some kind of diversion while we unleash our evil schemes, said Evil Harold. The villains looked around the treehouse for anything they could use. What's this little thing, said Evil George. He pressed the button on the back of the miniature Goosey Girl 4000. Suddenly, a beam of energy shot out of the tiny contraption, accidentally zapping Evil Sulu, who was tucked inside Evil Harold's shirt pocket. Immediately, Evil Sulu began to grow bigger and bigger until he leaped out of Evil Harold's pocket and fell to the floor with a giant thud. Evil Sulu was now the size of a full-grown sheepdog. The villains all smiled at one another as they watched Evil Sulu growl and snarl ferociously. "I think we've found our diversion," said Evil George as he zapped Evil Sulu again. That's not even an evil hamster anymore. It's just me when I don't have coffee in the morning. Chapter 18. Crash! Suddenly, Evil Sulu grew to the size of a giant monster. He jumped out of the treehouse and landed in George's backyard with a terrible, thunderous crash. "What was that?" cried George's dad. Everyone jumped up and dashed outside to get a better look at the horrible creature that towered over the house, snarling and roaring hideously. For some strange reason, George and Harold's grandparents jumped up and dashed the fastest. Faster than they had moved in years. But nobody really noticed because of the giant hamster thing. "What's going on?" cried Harold. "Those evil guys must have followed us back to our own reality somehow," whispered George. "We've got to stop them before they take over our world." Sulu crashed and smashed his way through the neighborhood, heading toward the big city because, well, that's where giant monsters usually head. George ran inside and grabbed the 3D Hypno Ring and the Super Power Juice, which felt surprisingly empty, and whistled for crackers. And while the grown-ups were fussing and fretting over trivial things like broken fences, insurance policies, and property damage reports, George, Harold, and Crackers flew off to save the world. Chapter 19, When Hamsters Attack.com, which, if you look on the Wayback Machine, was actually a real site that Dav Pilkey used back in the day to promote this book before it came out. Soon the three friends soared over the center of the city. There they met up with their beloved pet Sulu, who was now a giant evil monster, destroying everything in his path. "Well," said Harold, "it looks like you and I are going to have to drink that super power juice so we can stop giant evil Sulu from wrecking the city." Harold," said George, as he eyed the carton of superpower juice suspiciously. "I'm so psyched," said Harold. "I've always wanted to have superpowers." Harold," said George again, as he held the carton to his ear and shook it back and forth. "I hope I get Kung Fu grip and X-ray vision," said Harold. "That would be awesome." Harold," shouted George, as he turned the superpower juice carton upside down. "There's nothing left." "What do you mean?" cried Harold. "There was like a third of a carton in there 20 minutes ago." "Well, it's gone now," said George. "It must have evaporated or something." The boys watched helplessly as giant evil Sulu continued trashing the city. "Well," said George, "I guess there's just one thing left to do." The signs say, "Do not read the sign. Private property. Do not disturb. Do not smell flowers. No salesman. Go away. Keep off the grass and do not climb tree." Hurriedly, the three friends flew to the house of their principal, Mr. Krupp. It was easy to find since it was the only house on Curmudgeon Boulevard that was covered in toilet paper. "Next time we've got to use single-ply toilet paper," said George. "We'll get better coverage." After a quick knock on the door and an even quicker snap of the fingers, Mr. Krupp transformed it into the amazing Captain Underpants. And in no time at all, the world's greatest, baldest superhero was face to face with the world's biggest, baddest bionic hamster. Chapter 20, The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 1 in Flip-O-Rama, trademarked. Introducing Flip-O-Rama. We already know how it works. Back in the olden days, incredibly graphic violence was believed to be harmful, dangerous, and even immoral. But now it's fun for the whole family thanks to the science of Flip-O-Rama. Hamster Havoc. Put your head on my boulder. Chapter 21, the anticlimactic chapter. The battle between man and beast was over. George and Harold petted Sulu's giant face and breathed a sigh of relief. "He'll be okay," said George. "He just got knocked out." "Great," said Harold. "It looks like all of our problems are over." "Not so fast," said a voice that came from somewhere on the lower right-hand corner of the next page. It was Evil George, along with Evil Harold and the ultra-evil Captain Blunderpants. The terrible trio had been busy working on their preposterous plight, which is just a fancy way of saying that they were busy robbing a bank. "Somebody's been messing with our giant attack hamster," said Evil Harold. "I think we need to teach those goody-goodies a lesson." "And I'm just the guy to do it," said Captain Blunderpants proudly. Instantly, the mood shifted. Everyone stood back. The air crackled with tension. The showdown of the century was about to begin. Captain Underpants would soon engage in a historic battle with his evil twin. Never before had our brave hero encountered an enemy who was so powerful. Pound for pound, superpower for superpower, Captain Underpants was pitted against his equal. He had met his match. It was to be the ultimate smackdown, an all-out war. the brawl to end all brawls, the definitive clash between good and evil, a momentous confrontation of the most critical. Snap! George and Harold snapped his fingers, and suddenly the horrifyingly evil Captain Blunderpants transformed into a friendly elementary school principal. "Aw, man," cried evil George and evil Harold. "We read your comic book back in Chapter 8, said Harold. Fourth wall break. "Did you think we wouldn't remember how to turn your evil supervillain back into a harmless principal?" George and Harold quickly found some rope and tied up evil George, evil Harold, and nice Mr. Krupp. "We're taking you losers back to your own reality where you won't bother us ever again," said George. "All we have to do is dehypnotize and shrink Sulu, and our job will be done," said Harold. "Nothing can possibly go wrong now." "You know, you really shouldn't say things like that," said George. "Why?" said Harold. Chapter 22, Kaboom! Suddenly, lightning flashed, thunder crashed, and the rain came a-tumbling down. "That's why," said George. You always jinx it." As the first few drops of rain hit Captain Underpants' pudgy face, he began to transform. In a matter of seconds, he changed from a confident, powerful superhero into an angry, annoyed elementary school principal. Unlike Wisely, the rain on the face thing was having the opposite effect on nice Mr. Krupp, transforming him, once again, into an arrogant, foul-tempered supervillain named Captain Blunderpants. Evil George and evil Harold smiled their evilest smiles as Captain Blunderpants snapped their ropes and yelled out a triumphant la-la-tra! George and Harold quickly snapped their fingers again and again, but it was having no effect. It was raining too hard and Mr. Krupp was getting annoyed. "This is the dumbest dream I've ever had," he shouted, "and I'm gonna go home and get back into bed." And with that, he turned and stormed off toward his soggy toilet paper-covered house. Snap, 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 snap! "Looks like the tables have turned," evil Harold snickered. "You guys haven't won yet," said George. Quickly, George and Harold leaped onto Crackers' back, and the three forlorn friends flew off toward their treehouse. "Don't just stand there," cried evil Harold to his creepy cohorts. "Let's get him!" Chapter 23, 2 minutes later. Back in George's yard, our heroes searched furiously through their treehouse. "I found it!" cried George. "The Shrinky Pig 2000 from Book 4. All we have to do is shrink those evil losers and we'll save the world." "Too late!" shouted Captain Blunderpants as he grabbed George and Harold by their shirt collars. "We'll take that shrinky thingy," said evil Harold as a contraption slipped out of George's arms. "I'm not sure how it works, but once I figure it out, I can think of about 1,000,009 evil things to do with it." Captain Blunderpants held George and Harold high in the air and snarled viciously. "Prepare to be pulverized!" he shouted. "We're doomed!" screamed Harold. "Now, wait just a pickle-pickin' minute, young fella!" shouted a familiar-sounding voice from inside George's house. Chapter 24, Nobody Messes with Our Grandbabies. Harold's grandpa and George's great-grandma stepped out into the back patio and confronted the big bully, Captain Blunderpants. "You put those babies down or you'll get the whooping of your lifetime," said George's great-grandma. Captain Blunderpants laughed haughtily. "We're not going to warn you again, Skippy," said Harold's grandpa. Captain Blunderpants continued to tighten his grip on George and Harold. So the two octogenarians joined hands, gazed fiercely into each other's eyes, and shouted, "Geezer powers, activate!" Quickly, they began spinning around and around. Faster and faster, the old folks twirled until a tornado formed around them, tearing away their clothes and jewelry and sending patio furniture flying violently. And probably making this page incredibly easy to draw, too. Suddenly, the twirling stopped, the tornado subsided, and the elderly twosome stood proudly in their underwear, huffing, puffing, and fiercely facing their foe. "Ooh, that was fun! Let's do it again, Henry," said George's great-grandma. "Heh-heh," laughed Harold's grandpa. "All right, my dear, but we've got to teach that silly Willie a lesson first." "Oh, yeah," said George's great-grandma. "That young fellow's got a hankering for a spankerin'." Harold's grandpa grabbed a couple of curtains from the kitchen window and tied them around their necks. "Not too tight, Henry," said George's great-grandma. With their capes in place, George and Harold's super-parents approached Captain Blunderpants triumphantly. "All right, sonny," said Harold's grandpa. "Prepare to get your bucket whipped by Boxer Boy and Great-Granny Girdle." Chapter 25, The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 2, and Flip-O-Rama, trademarked. The Geriatric Jawbreaker. A cane in the brain. Take a walker on the wild side. Chapter 26, Shrinky Dorks. "You know," said George, "I think I just figured out what happened to the superpower juice that disappeared earlier." "Oh yeah," said evil George, "but you didn't figure this out. All we have to do is press one button on the shrinking machine and you'll all be transformed into tiny little shrimps." Go ahead and press the button, laughed Harold. You're just holding it backwards anyway. You'll just shrink yourselves. Really? Said Evil Harold. Gee, thanks. He turned the Shrinky Pig 2000 around and pressed the button. Zap! And they were shrunk to the size of potato chips. Shouted Medieval George.
What happened?
Oops, said Harold. I guess I made a mistake. You actually were holding it right the first time. My bad. You know, said George, I think I know two little boys who could really use a good spanking. Chapter 27, the incredibly graphic violence chapter part 3 in Flip-O-Rama trademarked. Well, folks, you know what to do, and you know how to do it. Happy Spanksgiving! Get it? Chapter 28, wrapping things up. Well, it looks like our job here is done, said Boxer Boy. Yes, it is, my big strong man, said Great Granny Girdle, giggling gleefully. George and Harold looked at each other in horror. You know, little lady, said Boxer Boy, somewhere out there is an all-you-can-eat buffet with a senior citizen's early bird special just going to waste. Well, let's go find it, you big hunk of love, said Great Granny Girdle as she kissed him passionately on his wobbly neck fat. The scene that followed could best be described as the drooliest 5-minute kiss in the history of children's books. Dentures sloshed, wrinkles flapped, and rubbery gel squished, smushed, and quivered gelatinously. Said Harold, I think I need to go wash my eyeballs. Me too, said George. And as the arthritic Avengers flew off into the sunset, George and Harold decided to try very, very hard not to think about the disgusting event they had just witnessed. Come on, we've got to wrap the story up, said George. First, we need to dehypnotize and shrink Sulu. Then we've got to go back into that crazy purple potty and return these bozos to their alternate universe, said Harold. Chapter 29, to make a long story short, zap! Chapter 30, to make a longer story even shorter, kick! The Chapter 31, the chapter where nothing bad happens. I'm not so sure about that. Gee, that worked out pretty good, said Harold. Sulu is now back to his normal size and personality, and the purple potty people are back in their own reality where they won't be able to bother us ever again. I guess everything worked out perfectly. Yeah, nice going, said George, looking a bit annoyed. Why do you have to say things like that? Things like what? Asked Harold. Haven't you been paying attention in these stories? Asked George. Every time somebody says something like that, it always means that a bunch of bad stuff is about to happen. Well, what could possibly go wrong now? Asked Harold. Freeze, shouted the chief of police. You guys are under arrest for robbing Frank's bank. Looks like you're going to jail for the rest of your lives. See what I mean? Said George. You've got to stop saying stuff like that. I guess you're right, said Harold, but at least things can't get any worse. Ah! Shouted George. You did it again! Now I bet when you turn the page, fourth wall break, something even worse is going to happen. You've got to learn to keep your mouth shut at the end of these books. Yeah, but what could be worse than going to jail for the rest of our lives? Like with what I said in the Dogman Brawl the Wild really loud, these cops are incapable of looking at the finer details. You see, Harold is wearing a tie and George is wearing a t-shirt, while normally it's Harold wearing the t-shirt and George wearing the tie. So these are definitely their evil twins. Chapter 32, the thing that could be worse than going to jail for the rest of their lives. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a ball of blue lightning appeared, growing bigger and bigger until it exploded in a blinding flash. And there, standing where the ball of lightning had been, was a smoking pair of giant robotic pants. This can't be good, said George. Gee, you think? A small opening at the front of the rubber pants began to unzip, and out of that opening peeked a fearsomely familiar face. Hey, it's Professor Poopypants, shouted Harold. The cops started to laugh. Stop laughing, shouted the little man, peeking out of the giant zipper. My name is no longer Professor Poopypants. I changed it to Dippy Dinkle Trousers. The cops laughed even harder. And I've got a special surprise for anybody who thinks my new name is funny, said the furious professor. Immediately, the metallic pants opened up at the top, and a giant laser shooter rose from its robotic depths. A brilliant burst of energy zapped the laughing cops, and suddenly they were both transformed into frozen statues. My freezy beam 4000 will take care of anybody who stands in my way, said Tippy. And now, he said with a wicked smile, it's time for my revenge. Oh no! Screamed Harold. Here we go again! Screamed George. And that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and also share this video with your friends or family members, and have a wonderful rest of your day.